What would you do if the only man who could save your life was the same man the whole frontier feared? The wind howled like a wounded thing across the ridge above the Larkspur ranch. It dragged coils of dry snow and the sharp smell of burnt pine through the fading light. Mara Larkspur stood knee-deep in icy mud behind the barn, both hands wrapped around the twisted leg of a calf caught in barbed wire. The animal thrashed in panic. Blood streaked its flank. Mara's breath came out in hard clouds, her fingers numb through her cracked leather gloves. "Easy, girl," she whispered in a rough voice. "I've got you." The last rays of sun spilled across the plains in long streaks of blood orange. Shadows stretched behind the fence line like dark fingers. Mara clenched her teeth and sliced the wire clean with her knife. The animal bolted into the dusk. She didn't follow. She just stood there, shaking, not from fear and not from the cold. From exhaustion. It had been 6 months since she buried her husband under the cottonwood tree behind the barn. 6 months of fixing fences alone, carrying buckets from a half-frozen well, sewing torn saddles by lantern light. The barn roof leaked. The northern pasture was in ruins. Winter had not even begun in full. She wiped her hands on her skirt and looked toward the soft orange glow of her kitchen window. For a moment, her eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. There were no tears left, not after everything this land had taken. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats. 2 horses, close. Her body went rigid. Nobody rode out this far at dusk unless they meant trouble. She grabbed the rifle leaning inside the barn door. The wood felt familiar in her hands, solid and worn from years of use. The sky behind the riders was turning violet. A tall man in a dusty coat slowed his horse at the gate. A smaller figure rode behind him. A child. The man dismounted slowly, like someone who hadn't slept under a roof in weeks. He removed his hat and looked her straight in the eyes. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low and steady. "Name's Caleb Holt. I was told you might be looking for help." Quote. Mara kept one hand on the rifle. "Who told you?" "Old man at the general store. Said a widow named Larkspur has been running a ranch alone. Said you were too proud to ask for help, but maybe not too proud to take it when it shows up." Mara almost snorted. That sounded like Jasper. Nosy as ever. Usually right. Caleb turned to the child. A little girl, wind-chapped cheeks, boots too big for her feet, and a ragged cloth rabbit tucked under her arm. She tugged her father's coat. "Papa," she whispered, "I'm cold." Something in Mara's chest shifted. A soft place she had buried months ago twitched like an old wound trying to heal. She lowered the rifle an inch. "What's her name?" "Juniper," Caleb said, "but she answers to June." Mara studied them. The man's coat was threadbare. The girl's dress had been let down twice. Their boots were split at the seams. They looked like people who had seen hard times and kept walking anyway. She took a long breath and let it out slow. "There's hay in the loft," she said. "You can put your horses up. When you're done, come inside. I've got stew on the stove and too much of it for one person." A flicker of something crossed Caleb's face. Gratitude, but the kind of gratitude held tight so it didn't spill over. "We're mighty obliged, ma'am." He led the horses toward the barn. June followed close, gripping his coat like it was the only safe thing in the world. Mara stood still for another moment, listening to the wind moan across the plains. For the first time in weeks, it didn't sound like a ghost. Inside the house, she added another log to the fire and set 3 bowls on the table. When they knocked, she opened the door to find both of them freshly washed from the pump. Caleb looked younger in the firelight, though still tired. June stepped in wide-eyed, staring at the quilts on the wall and the shelves full of books. "It's pretty," she whispered. Mara felt an old warmth rise. "Thank you." "Want to help me set the table?" June nodded and carefully carried spoons in her small, trembling hands. They ate in quiet, spoons scraping bowls, the fire popping. June's soft laughter when Mara asked if she liked the carrots. Caleb watched his daughter with a gentle look that made Mara's throat tighten. "You travelin' long?" she asked. 3 weeks, Caleb answered, Had a cabin in Wyoming. My wife, he paused. She passed 4 months back. Fever took her quick. Mara nodded. I'm sorry. Couldn't stay there after. Too many memories. Couldn't leave June neither, so we've been riding. Most folks don't want to hire a man with a kid. He looked at the girl sleeping against his shoulder. But I won't leave her behind. Not ever. Mara didn't speak. She just watched June's slow breaths and the way Caleb's hand rested protectively on her back. I've got a storage room by the kitchen, Mara said softly. Enough space for 2 bedrolls. Caleb looked up, surprised. You offering us the job? I'm offering you a trial. 2 weeks, $30 a month, and board. You'll earn it. He extended his calloused hand. You have my word. They shook on it. No papers, just truth. Later, she carried June to the back room. The child's arms looped around her neck with simple trust that hit Mara harder than she expected. When she returned to the fire, Caleb stood there, silent. Thank you, he said. Save it, she replied. You'll earn it come morning. He nodded. How long's it been for you? 6 months, she whispered. Gets easier, Caleb said. Not easy, just easier. They stood in the warm flicker of the fire, 2 tired souls on worn land, unsure of the future but no longer standing alone. And outside, the wind carried something new through the dark plains. A beginning. What if the only safety left in the world was a man everyone else feared, except you? The plains woke slow the next morning. Frost clung to every rail of the fence. The air bit hard enough to sting a person's lungs. Mara stepped onto the porch with a mug of coffee and stopped short. Caleb Holt was already awake. He swung a rusted sledgehammer into the frozen ground, driving a fence post straight into place, as if he had been born with iron in his bones. His coat hung on the rail. Sweat darkened the back of his shirt despite the cold. Every strike rang across the valley like a warning bell. He didn't even sit down for breakfast, Delilah Graves said from behind Mara, one hand on her hip and a warm loaf of molasses bread in the other. You sure know how to pick 'em. I didn't pick anyone, Mara replied, though there was a tired smile tugging at her mouth. He just works. Delilah snorted. You said 3 plates at breakfast. That tells me something. Mara didn't answer. She just watched the man swing the hammer again, steady, strong, silent. A man who carried his grief the way other men carried guns. Inside, June sat at the kitchen table coloring on the back of an old feed bill. Her small hands moved with care. She looked up when Delilah walked in and smiled wide. Morning, Miss D. Delilah's face softened the way it always did with the child. Ain't nobody sweeter than you. June held up her picture. Daddy said I can help cook tonight. Miss Morris said I can chop carrots. You got the hands for it already, Delilah said. But don't go cutting off a finger. Miss Mary ain't got time to stitch you back together. That afternoon, the sun broke through the clouds and laid gold over the fields. Mara walked Caleb through the old tack room, pointing out stiff harnesses and cracked leather straps. You'll want to oil those bridles before we move the cattle, she said. Feed bags need mending too. Rats chewed them last winter. Caleb nodded. I noticed. Mara frowned. Meaning what? He looked at her, not unkind. Meaning you've been carrying all of this alone. No shame in saying it. She bristled. She didn't like being seen that clearly, but the truth was what it was. They ate supper together again that night. June chattered about seeing a jackrabbit. Caleb listened quietly. Mara found herself pouring second helpings before anyone asked. The house felt different. Lived in. After June fell asleep, Mara dried the dishes while Caleb stood by the fire. You were law once, she said. He didn't deny it. Deputy Marshal back in Kansas. What changed? My wife died, he answered. When she went, everything good in me went with her. I rode away from that town and kept riding. Mara didn't know how to answer. She just nodded. Outside, the wind picked up. It rattled the shutters like bones. The next morning, everything changed. 3 riders appeared at the gate, slow, mean-looking. One wore a fine wool coat and a smirk that did not reach his eyes. You Larkspur? He asked. Mara didn't move. "Name's Pike Morrison. I work for Cyrus Hardin. He says some of his cattle been straying onto your land." Mara stood straighter. "My herd's been fenced tight since last week." "Then maybe you're lying," Pike said. He leaned forward. "This land's full of accidents. Barns burn. Folks go missing. Would be a shame if something happened, especially to that little girl of yours." June peeked from behind the curtain inside. Mara felt her heart stop. Then Caleb stepped forward. Calm, cold, deadly. "You ever threaten a child again," he said in a voice that froze the air, "and you'll vanish into this land like dust." Pike laughed. "Big talk for a hired hand. Try me." Quote, something in Caleb's eyes made Pike's smile falter. The men turned and rode off in a cloud of dust. Mara's hands trembled. He wasn't bluffing, was he? "No," Caleb said. That night Caleb sat outside the house, rifle across his knees. He didn't move, didn't blink. He was waiting, watching. Mara couldn't sleep. June cried once in her dreams. Mara soothed her and then stared out the window at the man sitting guard in the dark. The next day, trouble came louder. Chaska Red Elk rode in at sunset. The Lakota tracker dismounted without a sound. "I saw smoke near your fence line," Chaska said quietly. "3 riders watching from the ridge." Caleb nodded. "They delivered a message earlier." Chaska shook his head. "Men like Hardin don't stop at messages." Delilah arrived shortly after with a shotgun and cornbread. "You know what kind of man Hardin is," she said. "He won't stop while he thinks this ranch is weak." Mara crossed her arms. "I'm not weak." "No," Delilah said softly, "but you're tired. And tired people make mistakes." Quote, that night, the wind screamed through the valley. Caleb sat awake until dawn, sharpening his knife by lantern light. Chaska stayed in the barn with the horses. Mara sat beside the fire with June sleeping on her lap. "This feels like a war," Mara whispered. "It is," Caleb said. "And I've seen men like Hardin. They don't care about truth. They want control. And when they can't get it, they burn it down." Mara finished. Caleb nodded. Before sunrise, Chaska found fresh boot prints by the pasture. "They want us to know they were here," Chaska said. Caleb loaded his rifle. "Then let them know we're ready." By noon, smoke rose in the distance. A warning, a test. That evening, June showed Mara a drawing of their home. A small house, a big barn, and 3 stick figures holding hands. "This is our family now," June said. Mara's breath caught. She kissed the girl's forehead and whispered, "Yes, it is." But danger was closing in. The land felt tight. The wind carried something sharp, something coming. And no one knew if they were ready. What happens when a man with nothing left to lose decides to fight for the only family he has left? Caleb Holt didn't feel the cold that morning. He didn't feel the wind. He didn't feel the fear. He only felt the empty space where June should have been. Her small bedroll was empty. Her doll lay torn in the dirt outside the front door. A fresh boot print sat beside it. Deep, heavy, cruel. Mara's breath hitched as she grabbed the porch rail. "She was just here. Caleb, she was just—" "She still is," he said, voice low and steady, "and I'm bringing her home." He didn't shout. He didn't rage. He just cinched his saddle straps fast and sure, like a man who had made up his mind. Mara stepped in front of him. "You're not going alone." "Yes, I am." "No, you can't stop me from riding after her." Chaska Red Elk appeared behind them with his bow already strung. "You'll need a tracker." Caleb didn't argue. "We ride in 5. They followed the trail west into Wounded Elk Ridge. Every broken branch, every hoofprint, every scrap of fabric June had dropped on purpose. The girl was smart, leaving signs for them like crumbs in the snow. "They're moving fast," Chaska said, crouching over fresh tracks. "But they're not hiding. They think they have enough distance." "They don't," Caleb muttered. By midday they smelled smoke, a thin column rising between pines, a campfire, a stopping point. A mistake. They crept up the ridge on foot, quiet as the wind. Below, in a clearing, 3 men lounged around a dying fire. And June, tiny, pale, wrapped in a blanket, was tied to a stump. She wasn't crying. She was watching, waiting. Mara's breath broke. She reached for her rifle, but Caleb caught her wrist. Not yet. One of the men crouched beside June. He lifted his hand. Then he slapped her, once. Hard. Mara jerked forward, but Caleb pulled her back with a grip like iron. His jaw tightened. His eyes burned with something cold and deadly. Then he stepped out of the shadows. I wouldn't do that again. The men scrambled, reaching for rifles. Caleb's gun fired first. One man dropped like a stone. Chaska's arrow cut through the air faster than breath, dropping a second where he stood. The last outlaw hesitated, fear pulling at his face. Mara stepped behind him, shotgun raised. Move, she said, and you die. He didn't move. Caleb ran to June, cutting the rope with shaking hands. The girl threw her arms around his neck, sobbing into his coat. I knew you'd come, she cried. I always will, he whispered, voice breaking. When Caleb turned back, Mara was still holding the shotgun steady on the last man. Where's Hardin? She demanded. South Ridge, the man stammered. He wanted the girl as leverage to pull you out. He got what he wanted, Caleb said. Now get out of my sight. The man ran so fast he left his hat behind. They rode home with June wrapped in blankets between them. The moment Larkspur Ranch came into view, smoke rose from the chimney. Warm. Safe. Waiting. Delilah burst onto the porch when she saw them. Thank the Lord, she's all right. June clung to Mara, burying her face in her shoulder. Mara held her like she might never let go. But safety didn't last long. Not with Hardin still breathing. He won't stop, Mara whispered that night as she sat beside Caleb on the porch steps. Not after this. Caleb nodded. Then we ended. How? Truth. The next morning, after a silent breakfast, Caleb rode into town with Mara, Chaska, Delilah, and June holding tight around his waist. Folks watched from the sidewalks, whispering. Everyone knew something had happened. At the sheriff's office, Caleb stepped forward and tossed a piece of paper at the sheriff's chest. It was the fake wanted poster Hardin had spread. The sheriff paled when he saw it. You knew it was a lie, Caleb said, and you printed it anyway. I did what I was told. Hardin. Hardin's not law. Not anymore. Today, the truth speaks. Then Caleb walked straight into Hardin's office. Cyrus Hardin looked up mid-laugh, whiskey glass in hand. Well, if it ain't the runaway marshal, he sneered. Come begging, quote. You took a child, Caleb said softly. You torched a barn. You forged a warrant. And you're going to answer for every piece of it, quote. Hardin stood. You won't shoot me. Caleb reached into his coat. Hardin flinched, but Caleb didn't pull out a gun. He dropped a ledger on the desk, Hardin's ledger, the one filled with forged deeds, stolen cattle brands, and payouts to hired mercenaries. Hardin's face drained white. This goes to the judge in Deerfield today, Caleb said. Your empire dies in ink. Hardin lunged for a drawer. Caleb drew faster. A gunshot cracked through the room. Hardin fell. Silence swallowed the town. The trial came quick. Witnesses stepped forward. Stolen land was reclaimed. The sheriff resigned. Hardin's men scattered like rats in daylight, and for the first time in years, folks walked Main Street without fear. Spring came slow but steady. Snow melted. Grass pushed green through thawing soil. Life returned to Larkspur Ranch. One morning, Mara stood watching June chase a chicken through the yard. Caleb stepped beside her, hands in his pockets. The fence held all winter, he said. So did we, Mara answered. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. A ring, forged from the horseshoe of the gelding he had saved from the burning barn. He didn't kneel. He didn't need to. She held out her hand. He slid the ring on her finger. That night they sat by the fire, June asleep between them under a quilt. Mara brushed a hand over the girl's cheek. She belongs here, she whispered. So do we, Caleb said. Outside, the wind brushed the plains gentle and soft. No warning in it now. No fear. just a promise. Home wasn't a place. It was who you came back to. It was who you protected. It was who you chose. It was family. And this time, the land itself seemed to agree.